Welcome to the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show with Larry Lawson. As a former career law enforcement officer and law enforcement educator, Larry focuses on the use of tried and true law enforcement investigative techniques in conducting paranormal investigations. Despite his experience and training, Larry also keeps an open mind to discussions on topics that deal with evidence that are not quite as physical in nature. Paranormal Stakeout guests are professionals in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology, conducting the investigations and research needed to further the cause of paranormal study. Larry advocates an agenda of standardization of structure and training in the field of paranormal investigation and research for the purpose of one day being able to produce the evidence needed to convince a jury of the existence of the paranormal. Whether it is ghosts, UFOs, unsolved mysteries, hauntings or cryptids, no topic is beyond the investigative reach of Larry Lawson and the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show team. Now, here is the host of the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show, Larry Lawson.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout, the show where nothing is off the table, whether it be ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, or anything else unnatural or supernatural. We'll discuss it right here. Welcome back. It's great to be with you. I'm your host, Larry Lawson, and we've got a great show lined up for you. We're coming to you from our home base down here in Vero Beach, Florida. And if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about what we do down here in my team with the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings, I'd invite you to go to our websites at paranormalfbi.com and indianriverhauntings.com. You can also catch some of our work on YouTube at Indian River Hauntings 2341. Now, if you'd like to make contact with me, ask some questions, give me your thoughts on the paranormal or the show, or questions you have, you can get a hold of me at ghostguy@paranormalstakeout.com. I'm sorry, .org. That's ghostguy@paranormalstakeout.org. So send in your questions, thoughts, and comments, and I'll bring them right up here at the beginning of each show. Now, tonight, got a really interesting program for you. One of the big names in the world of ufology, Mr. Preston Dennett. Preston began investigating the UFOs and the paranormal in 1986. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. He's a ghost hunter, paranormal researcher, author. He's got several books on the UFO bestseller list with Amazon. He's also been on Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and also History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFOs Hunters and Ancient Aliens. He is a busy man in the world of the UFO, and I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Preston Dennett. Preston, welcome to Paranormal Stakeout, my friend.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me on. I truly appreciate it.
Really happy to have you here, and I find it really interesting and prophetic, if you will, considering the hearings that went on today in Washington. But for my members of my audience that may be just getting to know you, can you tell us who Preston Dennett is, how you got into the field, and where you're heading?
Yeah, sure. I got into this field involuntarily, kind of kicking and screaming. I really resisted it. I was not at all attracted to the subject of UFOs or anything paranormal really at all. Mm-hmm. I considered myself very scientifically minded. And, if I can't see it, feel it, touch it, it's not real. But that, of course, all changed in 1986. As you mentioned, it was November 17, to be exact. Mm-hmm. There was a very well-known UFO sighting over Alaska on that day, which made the evening news. And I'm sure you've heard of it, Captain Torochi, flying a commercial airliner over Alaska. Mm-hmm. It was on radar. It was a good sighting, but the news just kind of joked about it. But I remember looking at this poor pilot thinking, well, he's obviously misperceiving. UFOs aren't real. Why would he throw his career away like that? Because I'm sure that's what would happen if you're a major pilot and you start seeing UFOs.
Especially back in those days.
Yeah, which turned out to be true, by the way. He was grounded. But it interested me enough to really sort of take a second look at this subject. Because I remember some years earlier, 5 or so years earlier, 7, my older brother Mark said he'd seen a UFO. Now, at the time, I was just a teenager. I really did not believe him, not for a second. But after hearing about this pilot, for whatever reason, I approached my older brother Mark again and asked him what he thought of this pilot. And he hadn't heard about it. But I said, well, didn't you see a UFO? He's like, yeah. And I asked him to tell me about it again. And this time I was ready to listen. And he described this incredible sighting. It was a saucer. It had little lights around it, dome on top, metallic, treetop level, no sound. And he chased it in his car down Reseda Boulevard. This is in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California.
Okay.
And so he's telling me this. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. He's like, no, this is exactly what happened. We saw it for 15 minutes. I'm like, we? He's like, yeah, I was with my friends. You know them, Phil and Greg. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know them. He's like, you should talk to them. They'd be really happy to talk to you. They'll verify my story. And that's what I did. And of course, they did. They verified it completely. There were minor variations, but they essentially said the same thing. And I'm like, wow, okay, he's not misperceiving and he's not lying. Mm-hmm. So what else could it be? Because it was clear it wasn't a helicopter or anything like this. So that's when I started asking other people. And I found out that I had a number of people in my circle of family, friends, and coworkers who had had really dramatic encounters. And by that, I mean, an hours-long sighting of a star-like object darting around. Mm-hmm. An egg-shaped object came over a family friend's home. Probably one of the most dramatic was, well, 2 people I knew saw grays, saw gray ETs. And another lady had missing time. So that's how I got pulled into this. Wasn't happy about it. I was a very unhappy camper because I had to reevaluate everything. And my first step was to go get some UFO books. So I was going to prove them wrong. This is swamp gas. It's got to be. Mm-hmm. Of course, I knew it wasn't at that point, but I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
Okay.
Yeah, and the books absolutely knocked me over.
What books did you refer to? Which ones set you on the right track?
Well, initially it was some of the books by Jim and Coral Lorenzen. Mm-hmm. Who are true pioneers in this field. I really respect them. I love their books. The Betty and Barney Hill story, The Interrupted Journey.
Sure.
Of course, the Travis Walton, was then the Walton Experience. It's now republished as The Fire in the Sky. Mm-hmm. But Incident at Exeter, about a wave of sightings in New Hampshire, I believe it was. So there were a few books out there. I found the Roswell Incident as well. Mm-hmm. There's not as nearly as many books as there are today. I mean, these were a little bit hard to find for sure.
And so where you started reading the books, did you search out others that were of like mind or had done research that you could learn from?
After a little bit, after I found out there was a UFO cover-up, that was pretty upsetting. Mm-hmm. And very quickly, I knew more about UFOs than just about anyone I knew. Because this subject wasn't being taught in schools, obviously. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really featured in the media. I found out about MUFON in 1987. And by 1988, I believe I had joined the Mutual UFO Network. And that's when I started really digging in. I joined them and I said, give me all your journals all the way from the beginning. I mean, I was dead set on learning about this. So I joined every UFO group, QFOS, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, Operation Right to Know came later, but yeah, if there was a UFO group, I joined it.
Okay. So when did you start working in the field, and did you have your own experience after you were out there?
Eventually I did. I started working in the field after my father referred me an interview with a lieutenant colonel. He was in the film industry, and they had hired a consultant for one of the TV series they were working on, which was Starman, the TV series.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lieutenant colonel. And that was my first recorded interview. And I have to say, it wasn't a great interview, really. This colonel basically towed the party line and said, there's nothing to UFOs. You should get out of this field. It's not real. If you think they're real, you're weak-minded.
Mm-hmm.
By that point, of course, I knew it was real because the books were very convincing. People I'd interviewed. So that's when I started formally interviewing. I took the MUFON field investigator test,
Mm-hmm.
which I have to tell you wasn't easy. I thought, this is a take-home test. This will be easy. It was a couple of hundred questions, and it was very difficult.
Well, what kind of questions would they ask you? And how did you have to study for it? They give you?
Well, no, they just kind of sent it to me. Now it's handled a bit differently, but back then that was how they handled it, and they just sent me the test, and I was shocked to see how big it was. There was a section on UFO history, which I aced. That was a breeze.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was a section on photography, a section on meteorology. I mean, there was a section on various sciences, and that was quite a bit more difficult. But I went to the library. There was no internet back then. You can't just look stuff up. So I studied real hard for it. Oh, yes. And I was actually pleased to see that it was difficult, because to me that showed that this was a subject that was being taken seriously, that there were scientists looking into it. Mm-hmm. And I did really well. I missed 2 questions. I was really mad because one was a stupid mistake. The other I genuinely did not know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's when I started formally interviewing people. I was referred cases by MUFON. I eventually contacted the police, gave them my number as a MUFON field investigator, so I got cases from them. I was getting a lot of referrals from people very quickly, friends, family, and coworkers initially. But I had a website up as soon as the internet came on in the early 1990s. Mm-hmm. And that was getting 30,000 hits a month. So
wow. So you've been actively investigating since 86, 88, right in that area then?
Exactly, yeah. And I just kind of kept behind the scenes. I did start getting calls to go on the radio pretty early, and eventually speak at conventions. And I started writing articles pretty early on. But I had been in this field for 10 years before I put out my first book. And it was about 5 years in, when I had my first sighting, that I would really call a sighting, because I had seen some unexplained lights. And I'm like, no, that could be a shooting star. This could be something. It's just an anomalous light. But on July of 1992, I was in the middle of investigating a huge wave of sightings over my hometown, which was in Topanga Canyon, California. And this was a huge wave of sightings. Not just sightings, but landings, cars being chased down the road, people being pulled up into craft, lots of onboard experiences. I mean, it was a big deal. People were calling the police.
Well, we got to get ready to take our first break here. So when we get back, I'd like to hear about this first actual sighting and experience that you had. So folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages with my guest, Preston Dennett. See you in a minute. And we are back with my guest, Preston Dennett, well-known ufologist. I assume that's still a proper term, ufologist. Because nowadays they use another term, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Is that the more correct term today?
Well, I mean, in some circles, I still like the term UFO. I'm a little bit old school. Okay. I don't think the term UAP really provides anything new. But
okay. Well, so you had this information you got from your brother. You did studying. You became part of the MUFON network, and finally you had your own experience, and it's why you were investigating things in your own town. Correct?
That's right.
So tell me what happened after that.
Yeah, well, I was visiting my brother, Mark, and my sister-in-law, Christine Kisara, who's starting to do illustrations for me for witnesses. And they
Okay.
were really helping me through this because they were both believers. They knew this was real. They had had experiences. My sister-in-law had had visitations by little blue beings. That was another witness I forgot to tell you. So I was at their house late one evening in July of 1992, and it became late. We were discussing UFOs, of course. And I'm like, well, I have to go home. This was in Woodland Hills. At the time, I lived in nearby, adjacent Canoga Park in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I don't know, a 10-minute drive home. So I had just left their house, and they live on a little tiny side street, which is very winding, very narrow. And I had no sooner left their house, maybe 2 minutes, and came around this very tight hairpin corner, which is pretty steep as well. So you can't go fast. I was going maybe 3 miles an hour. And I saw what I first thought was a bird swooping towards my car from the upper right. Looked up and I thought, well, maybe that's a firecracker because it's glowing. And very instantly I knew it was not that because it dropped down right in front of my windshield, and it was a small orb about the size of a ping pong ball, a little bigger, a golf ball, around there. But it was a solid object. I mean, had hard edges, was yellow white, and stopped right in front of my windshield. Of course, now I'm thinking maybe this is a reflection, even though I knew it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it started moving back and forth once, twice, a third time, and came back and stopped again. I had a real sense of intelligence from it, or certainly intelligently guided. And then it scooted forward, dipped down a little bit, and went straight up into the canopy of the trees. And the last thing I remember, Larry, is gripping my steering wheel and watching it disappear. That's it. It was wiped from my mind completely. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember seeing it. I don't remember anything about it until 4 or 5 months later, when it just popped back into my head. I'm like, that happened. Which was an interesting experience, to say the least, because I had certainly interviewed people by this point who had described having missing time. And
How much time did you lose? Did you lose total? Do you know?
You know, I don't. But I just find it incomprehensible that I did not turn around and tell my brother and sister-in-law what just happened. I've had previous UFO sightings after that, certainly. In fact, that year was huge. I had a sighting 1 month later, another one the month after that, and they started to come fairly regularly. But no, I don't remember driving home, so it could have been any amount of time. I don't know. I don't remember waking up the next morning thinking I saw a UFO or an orb, at least. And this wasn't a craft, but it was absolutely unexplained. I'm sticking to my guns on this. I know I saw it. I remember it vividly, even though it took me a while to have it come into my conscious awareness.
Now, you don't remember anything that happened after you saw the orange orb. So I'm assuming you've never regained that memory?
I haven't. I've considered hypnosis.
Well, that's what I was going to go with. Have you thought about regression therapy on that to see maybe if that would jar the memory?
Yeah, I've considered it. I generally don't recommend hypnosis to the people that I interview unless they've had a very clear-cut case of missing time, which that was. I would qualify that as pretty clear-cut. But also, unless you have real anxiety about it that's causing you problems where you can't sleep at night, or it's affecting your daily life in a way that's making it difficult to live a normal life. I think hypnosis works. I think it's been verified well enough, but also in the wrong hands, it can do damage. And some people I talked to were not happy because they had basically hypnotically recalled memory, and it wasn't the same as spontaneous recall, which is what I'm hoping for.
That's interesting you mentioned that. I'm going to go down this little hole here for a second, because I've had folks on the show that did regression therapy on abductees and have basically said they've had a lot of luck with it. But you've just said something very interesting, that sometimes the memory isn't exactly the way it happened. Is that how I'm taking what you're saying?
Well, I don't. I want to be careful here.
I
I
get
think
it.
in the wrong hands. Yeah, I think that there's some excellent researchers out there, but
Hmm.
some are not. And I think people get encounters that might be a little bit colored by the belief system of the researcher. Uh, and also, if you look into the science done on hypnotic regression, it's very sketchy. Uh, I I know it works because the stories recalled through hypnotic regression match what people have consciously recalled to a remarkable degree. There's
Well,
no doubt in my mind it works, and science has proven it works, but there are many cases where people have absolutely false memories. So it's controversial. I think that most researchers will agree with that.
and from my angle from law enforcement, I've been involved with the cases that I've worked that have done that. And I agree with you. It's been very, very successful. But when you say in the wrong hands, I couldn't agree with you more, because I've also seen a lot of harm that's done. Kind of, I'm getting into this a little earlier than I wanted to, but it does make me want to ask you the question about those that are trying to make something of themselves that aren't. In other words, a person that's doing that type of therapy, using it to improve their own status, or creating stories that aren't there to help them gain fame and fortune. Do you see a lot of that in your field?
I wouldn't say I see a lot of it, but certainly we do see it. This field attracts all kinds of people who are in it for a buck,
Hmm.
people who are very much a part of the fringe element, people who aren't properly educated in perhaps psychology. Barbara Lamb is someone who I would point to as who's done this right.
Hmm.
She was a counselor by profession when she started hypnotizing people. She
Hmm.
had learned, she had gone to school to learn hypnosis. While there are others who are perhaps scientists but have not had any education whatsoever on hypnosis and just started doing it.
Hmm.
Uh, and Bud Hopkins, I love as a researcher, but let's face it, he just jumped right into the deep end of the pool and started doing this without a whole lot of education, and had to learn through the school of hard knocks. And I think he did a great job. I
Hmm.
think his books are very objective, but there are some researchers out there who are, I'm not going to
Oh,
name names, but
no, I don't want you to. But I agree with you, and I think it's a helpful tool, and it does work, but it can be a very dangerous thing in the wrong hands, and that hurts. I mean, I research ghosts, so I deal with a lot of folks on my end of it too, that are doing it for, not all the right reasons, and I'm sure obviously you have it on your end. What do you think we need to do to help insulate our fields, both paranormal, but different areas of the paranormal? What can we do to insulate ourselves from charlatans? Do you have any thoughts on that?
well, yeah, certainly. I think it's really behooves the person who's seeking hypnotic regression to do their own research. Because
Hmm.
there are people who are absolutely experienced in this. Yvonne Smith is someone who's had an incredible amount of experience with this. So look people up before you just dive in, and
Hmm.
make sure that they have at least some experience doing this and don't have an agenda, and
Yeah.
can provide you with referrals.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I'm not even just talking about the regression. I mean, folks that are researching the UFO
yes.
field in general. Because that's one thing that hurts all of us, is when one person gets found to be faking evidence. I've had some pretty wild stories told on this show that is not backed up by any facts, any evidence, and that worries me, because like in my side, it can ruin everybody's reputation. I'm sure it's the same on your end. So I was just wondering if that's something you dealt with, and would you keep that from happening in your field?
Yeah, well, I've certainly had to stick by my guns a few times.
Yeah.
I
Training
mean,
and education is where I'm at. Training and education is where I'm
yeah,
at.
which is
So,
what I love about MUFON, because they
mhm,
do basically vet researchers.
mhm.
So if you want to start getting referred cases, now that you have to go through classes. Back then, when I became a researcher, there wasn't anything like that. But I will tell you, there's been times that I've gone on television. There was one time the news wanted to interview me, and I took them up to a UFO landing spot. This was in Topanga Canyon during that whole wave of sightings in the early 1990s. And I showed them where the landing spot was, and the reporter says, "Oh, is that the landing mark right there, the hole?" And I'm like, "No, that's a gopher hole." He says, "Would you mind just pointing to that and saying that that's a landing trace, a landing spot?" I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that." And he tried to trick me. He says, "Just stick your hand in there and we'll get a picture of you doing that." I had learned the hard way, do not do that. So you have to be very careful. You cannot be careful enough. I see a lot of shoe fitting and cherry picking in this field as well, with researchers who have a theory and are trying to find the cases, the evidence that fit their theory. That's not good science. The theory comes later. First, the data, then the theory. So
my hat's off to you. I mean, that shows you're a man of integrity. So my hat's off to you, because that's the one thing that worries me, as I said, about this entire field, are folks that are willing to fake it for that 1 minute of fame, and it ends up hurting all of us. So excellent. Now, in a couple of minutes, we're getting ready to take our next break. Oddly enough, the time is flying. When we come back, I want to hear about some of your more interesting cases, some of the things that you've come across in the field. So if folks, if you will stay with us, I'm with Preston Dennett tonight. We'll be back in just a minute, right after these messages. So stay tuned. And we are back with my guest, Preston Dennett. 30 years you've been in this business, a long time. You obviously have a solid reputation in the field. You've done a lot of field work. Can you share with us some of the things that you've experienced out there, either from your own experience or from investigating and interviewing other witnesses?
Well, that's a pretty open-ended question.
It is. Gives you a wide field of to work in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting when you have your own encounters, which I have. I've seen UFOs, but people I've talked to, I think, have a lot more interesting stories. And I've heard it all, everything from sightings to landings to face-to-face encounters to onboard experiences. People have had healings. I mean, you name it, I've probably heard it. There are some cases I find particularly interesting, certainly, ones that my mind keeps going back to. And one I haven't talked a whole lot much about, because there's always so many cases to choose from. But I love this one because I've done a lot of research into USOs. And this is a case involving 3 witnesses. I was able to interview 2 of them. The other had passed away, but the main witnesses are Joy Williams and her husband, Tom, who live in the town of Aptos. This is sort of in the central to Northern California area near the Monterey Bay. And it was in August of 1997 when she stepped out on her balcony and saw a glow in the water. They're about a half mile to a mile away from the water. I think it might have been a little closer. Actually, I think it was about a quarter mile. So she saw this sort of green-yellow glow, and she's watching it when suddenly this craft rose up out of the water. And it was quite large, and she was close enough to see that it had little portholes around the circumference of it, and close enough to see algae and water coming off of it, and it lifted up and hovered over the water. So this is when she called over her husband, Tom, and her friend, and they watched this thing move kind of lazily up the coast towards the Moss Bay power plant. This is a coal power plant. And this darn UFO went right up to the top of the smokestacks there and hovered right next to it. And out came this weird contraption, like an arm, sort of a lever, which came out the far end of the UFO, swung over it and into the smokestack. And it had pinchers on the end of it. And it appeared to be taking samples of the top of the smokestack. So they did call the police. This was a sighting that was quite long lasting, over half an hour. And the police were very cooperative until the word UFO came up. Because the police are saying, oh, well, you probably just are looking at a boat. We're like, no, this thing is hovering right next to the smokestacks at the Moss Landing power plant. And at that point, the police officer became pretty truculent, disagreeable, argumentative, and ended the call.
Mm-hmm.
So they called up the radio station, who said that they had not received any calls. And basically were left without any recourse. And after about, so many minutes of watching this thing kind of pawing at the top of the smokestack, it just blink went out. So I did some research on this area, and I was amazed to find that this is not the first time that the Moss Landing power plant has been targeted by UFOs. I found 4 other cases, both before and after this incident, where orbs were seen or objects were seen circling the power plant. I find this case interesting because we do see a lot of cases of UFOs targeting technological installations, dams, power plants, nuclear power stations.
Was this a nuclear plant?
No, this was a coal power plant. Yeah.
Okay.
But there was a very, very similar case in Morenci, Arizona, where UFOs were seen hovering right over the smokestacks there, widely viewed. It was sending down little probes. So I think this case does have some interesting insights into the phenomena. They're clearly interested in things like this, because when people are taken on board and they get a message beyond, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you, it's often something along the lines of warnings against nuclear proliferation, or pollution or warlike ways. That fits right in with all that.
Yeah. If I may ask, how long ago was this incident?
That was in August of 1997.
97. So cell phones that take photographs probably weren't all that common then, that at least took decent photographs. Did they get any kind of picture at all of this craft?
No, though they did send me very detailed drawings.
Okay.
So that was something. She did try to report it. She reported it to MUFON. She, I believe, contacted Linda Moulton Howe before she found me. And I found it a very compelling case because there were multiple witnesses, and they both described the same thing. It's an unusual case too. I mean, I've never heard of one quite like it.
Well, an arm sticking out sounds like War of the Worlds or something like that. That's the first thought that I got. The third person you said that you couldn't interview because they had passed away. Where was this person? How did this person observe the incident?
She was there on the balcony with them. It was a little dinner party just between friends.
Okay.
And they had a little telescope too. So they were able to actually zero in on this thing and get a very good look at it.
But so how often in your cases do you get somebody that's able to get a photograph?
Very rarely, but it certainly does happen. More recently, I interviewed a lady by the name of Dolly Safran. She's the subject of my book, Symmetry. And her case is more extensive, I think, than anyone else I've ever had the privilege to interview. And she has fully conscious encounters since age 14. A lot of people do have missing time. They have a lot of fear. Not her. She overcame that. And she's had a lifetime of encounters. And when she decided to go public, because she had tried to get photographs many times, I've talked to many witnesses who have tried, and it's not easy to do. But when she decided that she was going to go public, she asked her contacts, which are grays mostly, if they would allow her to photograph them. And they said yes. And this is when she started getting some really remarkable photographic evidence. And not just photos, but videos as well. And I was able to put some of them in the book. Obviously, the videos you can't. But we've done some interviews where she's played this footage. And she has of course, a YouTube channel where she's put some of this out. And it's really remarkable footage. I mean, it's some of the better footage I've seen that's out there.
Wow. That is because so often we hear the stories, but we just don't see a lot of evidence. Obviously, there's not a lot of trace evidence, but photographs comes to mind. Now, kind of switching gears a little bit and getting to the hearings and all the press that UFOs are getting these days. With the government now being, looks like trying to be more open, do you see us being able to collect more evidence or get the opportunity to collect things that can prove or even disprove this exists?
I don't think we're going to have any luck disproving it because
Okay.
just to be fair, I mean, I think that the evidence is fairly conclusive at this point that this is a real phenomena. I'm very much encouraged that this is opening this field up to a lot of new people who had not taken it seriously or had refused to look at it or who were skeptical for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And now just the fact that we have members of Congress talking about it in a way that's absolutely taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these hearings, which were, today, are historic in the fact that this is really the first time members of Congress, sitting members of Congress, have heard reports from whistleblowers talking specifically about the possibility that our own government or factions of it have ET hardware, craft, and bodies. That's never happened before. We've had prior congressional hearings, but they were about sightings mostly. These were scientists, James McDonald, Jalen Hynek, people like that who are UFO researchers. So this was a little different from anything we've ever seen before. So that's pretty exciting.
And we had two pilots on there. One of them was one of the pilots that observed the Tic Tacs back a number of years ago. But when do you think we're going to actually start seeing evidence presented to the public? And like, for example, the lady just spoke about that got the videos after years and years of contact with the graves. When will the public see those videos and have a chance to vet those? Do you think the government's going to start letting out evidence so that we can all see? Because right now it's just words. And like I said, my investigation research into ghosts, I get it. I get the criticisms and all the shots. But it sounds like we've got something very tangible here. When do you think we're going to see it?
Yeah, well, we're starting to see some films, the Tic Tac footage, the gimbal footage, little bits and pieces, which are largely leaked. These are not necessarily officially sanctioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point, we will see probably some more films. We may even see a piece of metal. I think they are going to dribble this out in a very controlled way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't honestly think we're going to have full truth and transparency ever, because we certainly aren't getting it now. Because if you look at this subject, it's clear that there are more than just the 3 whistleblowers who were presented today. There's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds, and it's been going on for a very long time. And we're not getting any real movement in terms of evidence being presented that I think, if you do your research, we have. The Roswell incident happened, and that's something more than just a mogul balloon. I don't buy that explanation for a second. So I think they have the hardware. I think they have the bodies. I think they have much better footage than they're releasing. So I'm having been in this field for so long, disclosure was always rumored to be on the horizon and it never happened. It's not happening now. These were hearings. It was all talk, no action yet. I want some action.
And that's kind of where I'm going, because what we heard today was, and I personally found the one pilot, the retired commander, I found him very credible. And we've seen his videos, but the time is coming where if it's out there, we need to see it. And hopefully that will be soon. And actually, we're about ready to take our last break. When we get back, would like to talk with you, Preston, about your theories of space travel and how you think they get here and your thoughts on that. So folks, stay with us for our last segment here. We'll be back right after these messages with Preston Dennett. And welcome back, folks, with my guest tonight, Preston Dennett. Want to remind everybody, if you want to find out a little bit more about what my team and I do, check us out at paranormalfbi.com or indianriverhauntings.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel at Indian River Hauntings 2341. I also want to strongly recommend that you check out all the other great programming on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Go to xzbn.net and you can see all the terrific shows that are here on the X Zone channel. Preston, if folks want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do it?
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of if you just go on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I have a website. If you punch my name in, it should take you there. It's prestondennett.weebly.com. I have a YouTube channel as well. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
Can people make reports to you, directly to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always interested in hearing from people if they have a report to share or questions or comments. I'm very open to that. I think people need a resource to go to because there's still, even today, people aren't aware of MUFON. They're not aware of the National UFO Reporting Center. That's really beginning to change now because there's a lot of information out there on this subject. But yeah, always happy to hear from people.
Good. One of the problems, and I keep referring back to my work in the ghost realm, if you will, we have a problem in our end of unity, of people working together, of coming together to share information, to come up with answers. Do you have that same problem in the UFO community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is true with all fields of science and study. There's a lot of politics, there's infighting, there's a lot of attention getters, there's flat out hoaxing. And so it's a real problem. I would love it if we could come to consensus on at least some things. I understand that people have their own theories about how to explain various phenomena, but there's no reason that we can't all get together and share the information that we've learned. I've tried really hard to put out all my information. I'm an open book. Even if you don't want to say buy books, I put out all my information for free on YouTube. So I know a lot of great researchers out there who haven't published a darn thing, and some not so great researchers who are spitting out stuff, quite a bit of it, which is not substantiated or done in a way that I think it should be done carefully and double checked and vetted and so forth. So yeah, I would love if we could all come together with some sort of consensus.
That is the only answer. That is the only route we can take to finally come up with these answers. But you just mentioned theories a moment ago, and I'd like to get your theory, your thoughts on how the UFO phenomenon occurs. How do they get here? So many people have argued, they cannot travel that length of time at that speed. They wouldn't survive. That's using physics as we know it, the way I see it. But what is your theory on how space travel occurs and how we get visited?
Yeah, well, I will say this is one of the things that kept me out of the field because I know how far away the stars are, and it would be basically impossible to travel that distance using the technology we have. And that is the crux of it, because people are saying, well, this is defying the laws of physics, the way they are moving. Not necessarily. The laws of physics, as you said, as we know it, which shows that our understanding is lacking in this area. And I have focused mostly on first-hand contactee accounts. And I will tell you, many of them have been told how these craft fly. And over again, the people are taken to what we would call the engine room and shown it. And of course, there aren't propellants or gasoline or fuel or rockets or anything like that. What people are basically told is that these craft fly harnessing or utilizing the magnetic fields of our planet or other planetary systems. It usually comes down to something along those lines: electromagnetics, gravitational fields. And a lot of people don't really have the scientific training to fully comprehend what they're being told. Some do. This is what I really loved about Dolly Safran, the lady I interviewed recently, because she was taught by them very carefully. She not only how these craft fly, but how to pilot these craft.
Okay.
This may sound unusual, but I've certainly talked to a number of people who've had this experience. And in fact, Grant Cameron put out a book called Sky Pilots, basically outlining some 60 people who have done this. And Dolly has explained that, yes, when it's around a planet, they use electrogravitational fields, the magnetic fields of our planet. But when it's interstellar, it's a completely different process where they use enormous amounts of electrical energy to open up what she calls a light gate, which is not really a wormhole or a portal or anything like that.
Okay.
But it's a way of opening up the third dimension into a higher dimension, which allows them to skip across the universe to any desired location. And all these craft, without exception, are flown psychically. So these craft are themselves living beings as well. So there's a lot to unpack with all of this.
There is. It begs the next question. It goes back to does our government know this? Do you feel that the government knows this type of propulsion usage?
I think they do. I can't prove it, but based on the accounts coming from whistleblowers, the fact that so many contactees have put this out, the information is certainly out there. If these people in Congress would pick up a UFO book, they would learn a lot more than.
Wouldn't it behoove the government then to talk to some of these people? If they've had this experience, they've had this training, wouldn't it be in the interest of the folks in the government trying to figure this out to interview these folks that you've interviewed? Or have they?
100%. I think they have. I think that, we've certainly seen in case after case, and if you go through the UFO literature, you will see this. Witnesses are questioned by government agents over and over again. I just was looking at another case where that happened, where two young boys had a UFO chase them down the street. This was in Pennsylvania, I think. And they were brought into the principal's office, and there was a government agent, and he questioned them both extensively on what they experienced. This was an earlier case, certainly. But yeah, I think our government knows a lot more than they're saying. It was very interesting in the first congressional hearings where the Pentagon officials were being interviewed, Moultrie and Daley, were asked about whether or not they had heard of the Malmstrom incident in 1967 in Montana. And they both denied knowing anything about it. I don't find that the least bit credible. I think they do know about it. I think they lied flat out. Anyone who's been in this field for any length of time knows what happened in Malmstrom in 1967. I think they do know. I think they know these. I think they have these craft. I don't think that they understand completely how they operate, because this is an extremely advanced technology. That's something pretty much all researchers agree on. We're dealing with something that's well beyond our own understanding. But yeah, I think they certainly know the basics.
Why do you think they don't spend more time talking to these people that have experienced it? They seem to be shunned. They seem to be ridiculed. Why not spend more time chatting with them if what they've experienced coincides with the what they already know? Why not use their knowledge? Are they?
Yeah, I don't know. I can only speculate. I think that they have people on the inside who are they have interviewed. I mean, I interviewed one gentleman, and he referred another lady to me, and she absolutely refused to talk to me. But she did tell him that she was forced to testify to government officials about her experiences. This was during the Topanga Canyon UFO wave. She was very upset about it. She said she's under constant surveillance. And I've had a lot of contactees who've had real trouble with the government. Dolly Saffron has been followed. I watched it happen when I met her face to face.
You saw her being followed.
We were followed from the UFO convention. This was the MegaCon in Lawson, Nevada. And we had rented a little Airbnb, which was some distance from the actual conference. And on a little tiny side street, and Dolly was sitting next to me, and this car kept right up with us on 2 or 3 turns. I thought, Dolly, I told her, I think we're being followed. And she's like, well, it wouldn't surprise me. And after 4 more turns, because I was counting, this car stuck with us. I pulled into the driveway of this Airbnb. We walked in, and this car pulled right up to the driveway and stopped, blocking the driveway. That is not normal behavior. And Dolly, who had already provided me with considerable evidence in this regard, just kind of shrugged and says, see, I told you this is what I live with. And her story is not unique. I had a contactee who had her hypnosis tape stolen. I had another contactee who had his contact notes stolen. I always tell people, I advise them, write down everything. It will help you therapeutically. It will help keep events straight, especially do this before hypnosis so you can differentiate what you consciously recall and what comes from hypnosis. He had his house broken into. This is in upstate New York. And they didn't steal his stereo. They didn't steal his camera equipment. They didn't take any money, nothing of value. They took his contact notes. So this is what we're dealing with here. These guys are not playing fair.
Why?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't think that they are on the up and up. I think they're lacking morals. I think that their power structure is being severely threatened by this subject. I don't think disclosure is happening because they want to be truthful and transparent. I think it's reached a point now where if they don't start disclosing, they're going to lose control of the narrative. They're going to become not credible. They will be disbelieved. So I think they're basically having their hand forced. These are people who absolutely know that UFOs are real. It's disingenuous when NASA says we don't have enough evidence to say what these things are. I'm like, really? So you've looked at sightings, but ignored the thousands of landing trace cases, basically 80, 90 years of research. What about the radar return cases? I mean, there's so much evidence. The implant removal cases, the medical evidence.
And the evidence is really where the world that I live in, and gathering that evidence and getting that evidence out and examining it and having it put out in front of folks. That's when we're going to finally come up with the answers to this, when the evidence is presented. And unfortunately, we're not there yet. And you're right. We've gotten a lot of words, but we're getting very, very little left, in the way of evidence.
Yeah.
So,
it's my opinion that disclosure is in effect already happened. There is enough evidence in the public arena. You have to really sift through a lot of disinformation and misinformation and outright hoaxing. I would point to the Turkey footage. Well, 2007, 8, and 9. That's excellent evidence. It's undeniable.
Well, and unfortunately, we've run out of time, Preston. We're going to have to do this again to continue on. But we're out of time right now. But I would recommend, folks, that you go out there and search for the evidence yourself. Go to the folks that have done the research and find the answers from them. Preston, thank you so much for being with us tonight, my friend. I wish Godspeed, and thank you for being here. And folks, thank you for joining us tonight on Paranormal Stakeout. It's been great having you. And until we meet again, take care of yourselves, love your family, and we will see you on the other side. Have a great night.